¿Qué tal, amigo? Muy buenas noches. Y pues bueno, pues ya estamos en vivo, listos para el lanzamiento del cohete Vulcan de la United Launch Alliance. Ahorita ya estamos en la transmisión oficial y pues en breves momentos, en escasos minutos, ya vamos a estar viendo pues el lanzamiento de este cohete. Ahorita pues ya nada más están explicando de qué se trata la misión. Digo, por ahí hemos estado haciendo algunas de las publicaciones. Tenemos información de qué es lo que se va a lanzar. Y pues bueno, dentro de esta misión pues está el módulo lunar, el Peregrine, en donde llevan una de las misiones que es de México. Y pues aquí estamos atentos al lanzamiento. Muchas cosas importantes tienen que suceder antes de que la misión se vuelva exitosa. Obviamente y principalmente, pues el cohete tiene que salir. El cohete tiene que colocarse en trayecto. El cohete tiene que funcionar. Eso es, yo creo que lo más importante para todas las misiones que van en ese módulo, ¿no? Sí. Pues bueno, te vamos a estar viendo. Faltan 7 minutos según esto. Pues bueno, sigue informando de que el clima está favorable. Oye, lo que están haciendo esos chicos desde que están revisando el estado de la misión.
The LETS payload. The Linear Energy Transfer Spectrometer is a small, low-power radiation detector based on time-fixed technology developed at CERN. It's similar to devices that we've flown on ISS and Artemis. The science we're expecting to get from the LETS detector outstanding is getting data from a radiation event, a solar storm on the moon. While crew are not there, that would be ideal from the standpoint of being able to get the data without putting crew at risk, and then utilizing that data to prepare for crew protection during the lunar operations.
Now, NASA's Science Technology Mission Directorate had a hand in today's launch. So here with me now is Nikki Werkheiser, Director of Technology Maturation. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So tell me how STMD, that's the shortened version of the directorate there, tell me how it invests in small business like Astrobotic.
Of course. So the Space Technology Mission Directorate, our mantra is technology drives exploration. So if you're really going to create new disruptive technologies that change the world,
Bueno, pues muy buenas noches para todos aquellos que acaban de unir a la transmisión. Estamos ahorita transmitiendo estamos retransmitiendo la señal del United Launch Alliance. Estamos ante el lanzamiento del Vulcan con la misión Peregrine. La Peregrine donde llevan más misioncitas y pues obviamente por ahí viene la misión Colmena de México. Pues estamos atentos a que sea el lanzamiento. Ya como quiera informaron que el clima está 85% favorable y recuerden que es importante revisar el clima antes de todo. Hace un momento estábamos platicando de lo importante que tiene que suceder paso a paso la misión. Para que se pueda confirmar que sea un éxito, pues primero que nada tiene que salir el cohete. Hay una ventana de lanzamiento. Si todo va bien, si todo se lanza, o sea, si todo funciona, pues se lanza. Luego de allí, pues el cohete tiene varias etapas. Tiene que estar funcionando todo a la perfección. Después de ahí, tiene que seguir el trayecto para que vaya rumbo a la luna, toda la misión. Después de allí, tiene que aterrizar el módulo. O sea, son muchas cosas que tienen que estar sucediendo. Entonces, pues ahorita estamos ante el primer paso, ¿no? Que es lanzar el cohete.
You know what I think? I think that means success. I think it's going to require all of us and our mutual strengths to make it happen.
Thank you, Nikki. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you see a beautiful launch today.
Me too. Let's go.
All right, we're just about under 31 minutes to the opening of today's 45-minute launch window. After Peregrine 1 today, Astrobotic will deliver another payload for us, and that's our Viper rover later this year.
For Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration Rover. But what are volatiles, and why is NASA looking for them? Volatiles are substances that easily evaporate, and one of the most important volatiles NASA is trying to map.
¿Cuándo es el lanzamiento? Estamos a 29 minutos prácticamente. Esa es la 1:18 de la mañana, pero ya son las 12:49.
NASA has selected Astrobotic for Viper's lunar delivery under CLPS, or the Commercial Lunar Payload Services initiative. And when Viper gets to the moon, it will search for ice on and under the lunar surface near the moon's south pole. About the size of a small car, it has a drill and 3 science instruments. Together, they will work to uncover how frozen water got on the moon in the first place and what has kept it preserved over billions of years. This mission will help NASA understand the environment where we plan to send astronauts as part of its Artemis program, which will establish a long-term presence on the moon and eventually Mars. That's your Artemis Moon Minute.
Our next Artemis mission is Artemis 2, which will send 4 astronauts around the moon. And work is already well underway on their ride, NASA's Space Launch System rocket. Right now, teams here at Kennedy are processing segments.
Apenas todavía falta un ratillo, faltan media hora para el lanzamiento, pero bueno, pues ya empezó la transmisión oficial.
And burn approximately 6 tons of propellant every second, producing 3.6 million pounds of thrust.
Ahorita de regreso yo. Vamos a estar viendo aquí. Vamos a estar atentos.
That opens at 2:18 and 38 seconds Eastern Time. The ULA team remains in a planned hold and right now working no issues. As for the Peregrine spacecraft, let's get another check of it from Olivia with Astrobotic.
Thank you, Megan. As you may recall, we are currently only monitoring the spacecraft's temperature and pressure while it sits inside the Vulcan rocket's payload fairing. And we're checking in with my team members in Mission Control and Alex Van Hoven, one of our flight directors in the very back row. He is providing us updates directly. Our mission team confirmed the spacecraft's levels are nominal and we continue to be ready for launch. And I'd like to take this time to say a well-deserved shout out to the entire Astrobotic team in Pennsylvania, California, and even a few remote workers. I'm sure you're all watching right now, and we thank you for your continued commitment to this mission and to lunar exploration. We really, really couldn't have done it without you. Now, as we sit tight for launch, we'll continue to monitor Peregrine. For now, back to Megan at the host desk.
A few minutes ago, I told you about NASA's LETS payload flying on Peregrine today. Now we'll learn about NIRVIS, or the Near Infrared Volatile Spectrometer System from NASA's Ames Research Center.
Hi, my name is Tony Colpreet. I'm the lead scientist for the Near Infrared Volatile Spectrometer System, or NIRVIS. The NIRVIS instrument combines three observations. It has a spectrometer that tells us about the composition of the lunar soil. It has a high-resolution camera that tells us about the fine-scale structures of that soil. And it has a temperature measurement that tells us the temperature of the lunar regolith. NIRVIS combines all these three measurements to help us better understand the compounds that are on the surface of the moon. Particular compounds we're interested in are volatiles. A lunar volatile is a compound that is very sensitive to temperature. At low temperatures, it's solid. At high temperatures, it's a vapor. Water is a good example of a lunar volatile. We believe water is manufactured in sunlit regions of the moon, either through solar wind or through micrometeoroid impacts, and then migrates to the poles of the moon where it's captured into dark, permanently shadowed craters. If there is water at the poles of the moon in substantial quantities, that might be of incredible importance and use to human exploration going forward.
Now, we still have 3 more NASA payloads to tell you about flying on NASA's first Commercial Lunar Payload Services launch. But now we want to turn the broadcast over to ULA. Amanda Sterling will walk us through the rest of the Vulcan rocket's inaugural flight through launch and ascent. And then Olivia and I will be back around 15 minutes after liftoff to continue monitoring Peregrine. ULA will join us in just a few seconds.
A program management leader and your host for ULA's live coverage of the inaugural Vulcan launch. I'm joining you from ULA's Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Thanks for staying up late or getting up early with us for today's exciting first launch, Vulcan's Certification Flight 1, or CERT-1. This is the first of 2 planned test flights to support full certification of the Vulcan rocket for U.S. government missions. On board the Vulcan rocket today is Astrobotic's Peregrine Commercial Lunar Lander on a mission to intercept the moon, and the Celestis Memorial Spaceflight Payload Enterprise, flying to deep space with the Centaur upper stage. Liftoff is scheduled for 2:18:38 a.m. Eastern, and we have a 45-minute launch window this morning. In addition to watching our webcast, you can also follow the live mission progress at ulalaunch.com. About 30 minutes ago, the count entered a 60-minute planned hold. We have 2 planned holds in our launch count, which give our team additional time to resolve any issues prior to entering the terminal count. At this time, the team is not working any issues, and we're proceeding towards an on-time liftoff. We're excited to partner with NASA on today's live broadcast. Together, we'll be continuing our coverage through end of mission. Building on more than 120 years of combined Atlas and Delta launch experience, ULA's Vulcan rocket introduces a balance of new technologies and innovative features to ensure a reliable and accessible space launch service. Let's hear more about this incredible launch vehicle from ULA Business Development Director Tom Burkholder and Vulcan Chief Engineer RJ Sansom.
So RJ, can you discuss a little bit of
Digo,
the
nada más ahí para
features
aclarar a
of
la
the
gente,
design?
porque luego empiezan a preguntar que si se verá, hoy lo va a ver y no sé qué. Para que se pueda ver un cohete, pues normalmente tiene que ser en la tarde, o sea, el amanecer o en la tarde. Ahorita no es la tarde ni el amanecer. Y aparte, si estamos lanzándolo desde Florida y pues están preguntando por Chihuahua, digo, a menos de que haya algo especial, pero normalmente no se ven. Digo, SpaceX nos tiene bien acostumbrados a que a cada rato se ven bonitos, porque normalmente lo hacen, algunos lanzamientos de tantos que hay se hacen por la tardecita. Y son las condiciones propicias para poderlo ver. Y aparte de este mucho escándalo, los cohetes de SpaceX se ven muy bonitos. Afírmamela, como dice Norma, es desde Florida, entonces no se va a ver al oeste. ¿De acuerdo? Pero digo, si quieren salir, pues sálganse y quédense en la noche ahorita a ver qué onda.
Yeah, from the beginning, we partnered with industry partners who have expertise and capabilities to help us bring new innovative technologies, as well as to leverage.
¿Cuánto falta? Faltan 20 minutos prácticamente. Faltan 20 minutos para el lanzamiento de la misión Peregrine a bordo del Vulcan de la ULA.
We partnered with Rocketdyne on development of our and implementation on that. Again, first flight on
Me dice Estrada, no voy a salir. Bueno, espérate.
Atlas, and then flying again on Vulcan. Partnered with Beyond Gravity on composite structures. And then we partnered with.
Y aparte los cohetes nos hacen para que los podamos ver.
System to BE4, the first Oxford stage combustion engine developed domestically. So, industry partners brought a lot to the table for us.
That's great. And then as we look at what this has meant to the market, it's been fantastic.
Pero bueno, ya falta poquito. 20 minutos para el lanzamiento. Y para aquellos que acaban de llegar y luego, pues buenas noches, pues estamos en la transmisión en vivo de la misión Peregrine 1, una de las misiones en donde va la misión Colmena de México. Pues vamos a estar atentos al lanzamiento. Recuerden, y hemos estado informando de que pues necesitamos esperar a que el lanzamiento se realice pues para poder ver si va a la luna y que aterrice, que eso es lo importante para ver si se puede concretar esta misión. Pero bueno, no es la única misión, ¿no? Hay otras cargas útiles que también van ahí. Pero si se llega a concretar, prácticamente México se convertiría en representante de toda Latinoamérica para este tipo de misiones para el rumbo a la luna.
I've been a part of the Vulcan team for a number of years, so I know how focused the whole ULA team has been. Can you talk a little bit about the teams that came together to design, build, and now launch this rocket?
I am so proud of our people, and I think we had exactly the best possible team. We've got folks that designed rockets before, like Atlas and Delta, but we also have the majority of our team, people like yourself, that are earlier in their career, know the new tools, aren't sort of handcuffed by
Dice Norman, esta semana han hecho muchos lanzamientos de SpaceX, sí.
Innovative work while also not making the mistakes of the past.
Absolutely. And, Vulcan is such a unique rocket. What are you most proud of about this vehicle?
I'm really proud of the fact that we still service the high energy marketplace a unique thing that
Y
is
vamos a estar
unique
viendo
to
más,
our
vamos a
mission
estar viendo más
security
lanzamientos
that
de
no one
SpaceX. Por
else
ahí
has an
anunciaron que
architecture
quieren
will do
hacer
that
pues, casi,
while at the same
casi
time breaking all the
12
rules and
por
having
mes.
dial a
Casi,
rocket
sí.
architecture
Son
gives it the
muchos,
flexibility to reach down into that LEO marketplace and be very competitive there
son
as
muchos
well.
lanzamientos los que quieren
Absolutely.
realizar.
So we're getting pretty close to liftoff now.
¿Cómo
How
está
did
Rosa?
each of
Muy
you
buenas
feel
noches.
watching the Vulcan rocket lift off for the first time?
Tremendous excitement and anticipation. I got to tell you, I've done over 400 launches. They're all the same. I always get butterflies. This one's really special because of what it means to our country, to our customers, and to the team that has worked so hard, including you, Agent Sterling.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you get back to it so you can make sure you watch liftoff, and let's go.
Go Vulcan. Thank you.
On board the Vulcan rocket today is Astrobotic's Peregrine Commercial Lunar Lander. Peregrine is the first spacecraft in NASA's new CLPS initiative to have American companies send its science experiments to the moon.
Astrobotic is a full-service lunar company. It starts with our terrestrial testing and development services that can build and test propulsion systems on Earth, to the sensors that make precision landing possible, to our rovers that will deploy down on the surface of the moon. The big thing that we're known for is our 2 lunar missions to go to the surface of the moon. Our first one is about to launch, and our second one flies in 2024. The Peregrine mission is important because it's among the first commercial missions to return to the surface of the moon. This is the dawn of a new era of affordable, routine, regular access to the surface.
Peregrine's development was a years-long process that included many people, like engineers, welders, and technicians, who designed and built the spacecraft.
To be on the pad today with our spacecraft strapped to a giant 200-foot tall launch vehicle, it's a little surreal.
Ese es
It's
el
the moment
Peregrine.
I've been
Ahí va.
dreaming about, and this first mission is just our first step
Ese es el
to make
aterrizador
space accessible
lunar.
to the world, and it certainly will not be our last.
Eso es lo que vimos hace un momento, es el aterrizador lunar. Es ahí donde van varias misioncitas.
Also riding atop today's Vulcan rocket is the Celestis Memorial Spaceflight payload. Let's learn more about this mission.
Celestis' Enterprise flight carries capsules containing cremated remains, DNA samples, and greetings from Celestis' clients worldwide. The capsules are integrated into 2 carriers that are mounted to the forward adapter on ULA's Centaur upper stage. The carriers will remain affixed to ULA's Centaur as it travels into a heliocentric orbit around the Sun, where it will remain for eternity. The Enterprise flight is Celestis' first deep space mission.
Ahí estaba diciendo que llevan unas muestras también de ADN ahí.
Flight control, LC. Go ahead, this flight control. Reduce Vulcan hydraulics to standby. Roger.
Today's rocket includes the American flag across the inner stage, as well as logos on the payload fairing representing ULA, Vulcan, and Astrobotic. While this is the inaugural launch of the Vulcan rocket, the CERT-1 flight test marks ULA's 159th launch. Let's learn more about this innovative new rocket.
Designed by ULA's engineering team and built by our skilled technicians, the Vulcan rocket, once fully stacked, stands 202 feet and weighs nearly 1.5 million pounds fully fueled. Vulcan's first stage is built using lightweight, machined and bump-pressed orthogrid aluminum panels to form the liquid propellant tanks. Once formed, tanks are joined together using circumferential friction stir welding before heading to the paint booth. Prior to mating to the booster, the BE-4 engines are individually hot-fired. At the base of the rocket is the Vulcan booster, powered by twin BE-4 engines. For additional thrust at liftoff, solid rocket boosters, or SRBs.
Miren, esa es la parte de todo el cohete,
Top
¿no?
booster is ULA's ultra-thin stainless steel Centaur upper stage.
Es ahí donde va toda la carga útil. Este no es como los de SpaceX que se pueden reutilizar. Este es desechable totalmente.
Rocket travels from the ULA factory in Alabama to the launch site in Cape Canaveral on ULA's rocket ship. Once in Florida, ULA's launch operations team begins a series of events leading to today's countdown. The process begins by lifting the 109-foot booster onto the newly constructed Vulcan launch platform, or VLP. For missions requiring additional thrust at liftoff,
No se va a ver.
SRBs are attached to the side of the booster. Then, following interstage mate, the Centaur upper stage is transported to the VIF and lifted into position.
Y basura espacial.
Lastly,
Correcto.
encapsulated payload fairing
Pero
is lifted and mated to the Vulcan rocket.
se desintegra
Once assembled, the launch countdown
porque
begins.
inmediatamente regresa, o sea, no se queda allá. Lo que sí hacen, fíjate, eso sí para explicarte. Por ejemplo, como saben que es desechable,
Weighing in at approximately
lo
200 pounds, the VLP supports
se
the
paran
rocket,
en una altura
air conditioning,
en donde saben que si se regresa se desintegra, se desaparece. Hay unos que sí los avientan al mar, ¿sí? O sea, la etapa que ya no sirve, pero sigue siendo basura. Como por ejemplo, los satélites de SpaceX, los de Starlink, todos esos satélites que están brindando internet, no los ponen tan arriba. Cuando dejen de funcionar, tienen un tiempo estimado de que duren 5 años en órbita. Entonces, están cayendo. La avientan en órbita y luego vienen cayendo. Un momento llegan y se desintegran, ¿verdad? No duran tanto. Los que sí son, por ejemplo, los chavos estos, los chinos. Los chinos, eso sí les vale queso y dejan ahí todo el mugrero y cochinero y dejan que caiga en las ciudades y todo bien increíble.
As we approach the terminal count pole, let's check in on today's weather. The Space Launch Delta 45 forecast for this morning's launch is looking good. The probability of violating launch constraints is 15%. Ground winds are 15 to 20 knots out of the north, and the temperature is 57 degrees Fahrenheit. The primary concern for launch is
Miren, esa tablita que está ahí, pues nos indica cómo están las condiciones del clima. Ahora dice ahí 15% de probabilidad de cancelación. O sea que si hay nubosidad o sea, si el clima está extremo, no lo lanzan.
We remain in the planned 60-minute hold as we continue towards liftoff. In a few moments, launch conductor Dylan Rice will poll the launch team for the final go to pick up the count. 29 engineers and managers are polled for system status and readiness to proceed. This is the final status check for all Vulcan vehicle systems, ground systems, spacecraft, and the U.S. Space Force Eastern Range. The vehicle system readiness poll includes electrical systems, hydraulics, pneumatics, propulsion systems, flight control, and propellants. Let's listen in as Dylan Rice performs the final polling.
Miren toda la gente. Miren, ahí llevan, por ejemplo, las cosas que déjame que lo quito tantito para acá. Voy a poner acá. Escuchen lo que dicen. Empiezan a revisar cada uno de los sistemas. LO2 es oxígeno líquido. Por ahí me estaban preguntando que cómo le hacen si en el espacio no hay oxígeno. Bueno, pues te lo llevas en el cohete para que puedas realizar todo el rollo.
RFFTS. Go. Flight control. Go. GC cubed. Go. Operation support. Go. COM. Go. Umbilicals. Go. ECS. Go. Red line monitor. Go. Quality. Go. Op safety manager. Go. ULA Safety Officer. Go. Vehicle System Engineer.
El importante es el que dice Launch Director o director de lanzamiento, el último.
To proceed. Launch Director. You have permission to launch. Proceeding with the count. ALC, verify T0 is set for 071838 Zulu. Verified.
Polling is complete and the team is go for launch.
Ahí está. Dicen
From
Go
T-minus
for
7
Launch.
minutes until
Quiere
liftoff,
decir de que
you'll
luz verde de
advise
lanzamiento. O sea,
launch
ya
plan
revisaron
steps in the countdown
todas
procedure.
las cosas posibles de
Several
manera
critical activities occur in the
por
final minutes
encimita o
before
breve,
launch,
¿no?
including verifying fuel tank levels and pressures in the booster and
O sea,
Centaur,
todo
and
revisan
arming the
antes.
flight
Hacen
termination system.
una lista de verificación de
At
que todos los
T-minus 1
sistemas,
minute, the
por
range
ejemplo, es
operations
como
commander
si tú
confirms
salieras de
range is
viaje,
in
a
the
ver,
green
llantas
position for launch.
infladas, por
At
ejemplo,
T-minus 25 seconds, you'll hear go
aceite,
Vulcan,
bien,
go Centaur,
gasolina,
go Peregrine.
bien, aire
This is the
acondicionado,
final status
bien,
check
y
of
así
rocket and
empieza
payload readiness.
a estar todo el show.
At T-minus 7 seconds, Rofi sparklers will ignite, followed a second later by initiation of the launch pad water deluge system. At
¿De
T-minus
acuerdo?
3 seconds,
Bueno,
the
ahí
main
va.
engines
¿Cuánto
ignite.
falta?
Then, after
7
safety,
minutos,
and
señores.
first ever liftoff from Slick 41, you'll begin hearing flight commentator Rob Gannon providing launch vehicle ascent data.
Vamos a estar atentos al reloj de la cuenta regresiva que está del lado izquierdo arriba. Acá. ¿Ok?
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T-minus 7 minutes and holding. We anticipate releasing the hold in just a few moments.
Todavía están esperando. Atentos.
On my mark, the time will be T-minus 7 minutes and counting. 3, 2,
Ahí va.
1, mark.
Muy bien. Inicia el conteo regresivo. Ahora sí.
6:55. Ground pyros enabled.
The countdown clock has resumed, and we are go for launch at
Luz verde.
2:38 a.m. Eastern.
Ahora sí. Van a empezar a revisar a detalle todo. Recuerden que esto puede ser cancelado en último momento.
East from Space Launch Complex 41. Here's a look at today's ascent.
Ahí va. Fíjense cómo va a estar funcionando todo el show. Sí, son 2 motores. Esto es un simulador de lo que va a estar sucediendo ahorita. Miren, algo interesante. Fíjense la trayectoria. Va a órbita. Muchas de las preguntas es de ¿por qué no se va derecho? No, porque va a la trayectoria de la Luna. Entonces tiene que estar dando vuelta al planeta de nosotros y agarrar vuelo, ¿verdad? Yo creo que por ahí van a estar mostrando para dónde va. Tiene que mostrar para dónde va. Incluso en la Luna va a estar dando vueltas para poder aprovechar la influencia gravitatoria para no gastar combustible. Tanto. Miren, ahí va. Y fíjense cómo se va a ir separando las etapas, ¿no? Eso es basura espacial, vámonos. Primero siempre el propulsor grandote, el de abajo, es el que el empuje. Después se apaga, se separa y sigue la otra etapa. Se inicia, y eso también puede que no inicie, puede que inicie después, pero tiene que estar funcionando y tiene que estar todo en tiempo, porque si se pasa tantito, ya toda la misión corre riesgo de que no se cumpla. Entonces tiene que estar sucediendo en tiempo y en forma. Todo eso que está ahí, que se abre, pues es el carenado, ¿no? O la carga útil. Eso es para proteger todo lo que va adentro. Ya se separa. Y ahora sí, después de ahí, vámonos rumbo a la Luna. Esa es la trayectoria. Si se fijan, realiza una vueltecita al planeta y le da. Sí, ahí va. Ahí dice, nos están indicando de que, pues bueno, el módulo Peregrine ya se separa y el otro sigue la vuelta, tirando rollo. Vámonos. Sí, las siglas de ULA, ¿qué son? Pues son de la compañía que hace el cohete, que es United Launch Alliance. ¿Ok? Ahí arriba dice ULA. Entonces faltan 3 minutos, jóvenes. Y sí, sí fueron hechos por chicos, pues, como 200 alumnos, o sea, muchísima gente participó en este proyecto. ¿De acuerdo? 3 minutos. 3 minutos y segunditos, casi nada. Entonces, ahorita nos explicaron qué es lo que iba a suceder. Aquí no es como SpaceX que nos dejan una barrita en la parte de abajo en donde nos van indicando las etapas, pero normalmente funcionan así. Siempre es una etapa principal abajo y luego otra chiquita arriba. La de arriba es la que ya te coloca en órbita o te manda a la luna, como que sea, pero vamos a estar atentos. Ya nada más faltan 2 minutos y pelitos, ¿de acuerdo? Esas son las iniciales, por ahí me preguntaron que qué onda con las iniciales. Bueno, pues son los chavos que hacen el cohete. Este es un cohete Vulcan. Güey. Atentos. Dos minutos. 2 minutos. ¿Cuánto se tardarán en llegar a la luna? Por allá de febrero y pelos, febrero 15, 16 por ahí. Digo, todavía no tengo la fecha, ¿verdad? Pero por ahí, ahorita vamos a estar mandando la información. Ahí está, luz verde. Febrero 23 es cuando aterriza. 1 minuto, chavos. Atentos, jóvenes, porque igual lo pueden cancelar en último momento. Si el director del lanzamiento detecta algo que puede poner en riesgo la misión, lo cancela, punto. Escuchen. 20. 15 segundos. 10. Ahí está, ya se lanzó. Excelente, muy bien. Ahí va, jóvenes. Igual, como todos los lanzamientos, tiene que pasar el Max Q. ¿Verdad? Si no explota en ese momento, está genial, porque es la máxima presión aerodinámica. Es el máximo estrés que puede llegar a tener un aparato de estos. Como cuando le pisas a tu carro que empieza a temblar, que ya no puede más. Es lo mismo con los cohetes, pero nada más de que hay otras dimensiones. A ver, vamos a escuchar. O sea, están diciendo que todos los motores se ven bien. Mira, ahí va. 1.10 es el Mach 1. Todo bien. Ahí viene el Max Q. No, ya lo pasó. Muy bien. Ahora, importante, por ejemplo, los propulsores tienen que estar encendidos hasta cierto tiempo. No puede estar de más, no puede estar de menos. O sea, tiene que ser el indicado. Dentro de los 3 minutos vienen el apagado del motor. El primer apagado del motor. Pero todo normal. Fíjense cómo se expande la llamarada. Ahí se ve bonito. Siempre se ve bien bonito. Pero todo bien. Todo en marcha. Pues ahí está. Ahí va. ¿Qué sigue? Está todo, sigue en marcha, todo bien. Todo operando de manera normal. Ok. Muy bien. Separación exitosa, eso es bueno. Ahorita sigue el encendido de sus motores. Ahí va. Muy bien. Los carenados ya separados, exitoso. También puede fallar, pero lo lograron. Muy bien. Bueno, estas imágenes que vemos aquí, digo, son parte del control, ¿de acuerdo? Les digo, toda esta imagen que están poniendo, pues es debido a la telemetría que están obteniendo del cohete, ¿de acuerdo? Por lo menos el lanzamiento fue exitoso, todavía falta que la órbita sea correcta, ¿de acuerdo? Y todo está en marcha. Digo, si quieres le subo. Ahorita nos confirman si ya se colocó en órbita rumbo a la Luna, ¿ok? Todavía falta que el apagado de los motores suceda en tiempo y forma. Digo, sí, recuerden que este está trabajando con la telemetría de todo el cohete. Porque bien pudieran mostrar la gráfica y números, ¿verdad? Pero pues hubiéramos preguntado qué esos números qué. Entonces es una manera de interpretar la información de manera más visual para todos los que estamos viendo. Se espera que llegue el 23 de febrero ya, ¿de acuerdo? Hace un momento mostraron la trayectoria, va a estar dando una pequeña vuelta a nuestro planeta y de ahí agarra vuelo. Yo siguen informando que todo está en marcha, todo bien.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T plus 10 minutes 7 seconds. Our next event, main engine cutoff, will occur in about 5 minutes. While we wait, I'm joined
Ahí
by
está, le
Eric
puse la
Honda, part of
voz de las
ULA's
chicas.
mission design team. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we're still pretty early in this flight today, but can you tell us how the data is looking so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to say that it was so exciting. I ran outside so I could watch this thing lift off, and that was so cool after so many years of development to watch this thing fly. That was fantastic.
Absolutely, I bet.
Yeah.
So, what is the data showing us so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a very quick look. Obviously, we're very early in the flight still, but I've taken a look at the SRB performance as well as the booster performance so far, and everything looks just spot on, just perfect. Fortunately, we've had a lot of these systems on Atlas and Delta for a long time. And so we have a lot of flight data to anchor our models, and everything is lining up just like we would expect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So a lot of the audience has seen us switch from this live view of the launch from our rocket cam to this animated representation of the vehicle in space. Can you talk a little bit about why we make that switch and how this visual is populated?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first lift off, we have a feed directly from the cameras that are on the rocket.
Fíjense, ahí está
back to the
explicando
center.
por qué estamos viendo esta
So with that,
interpretación.
we can get the video feed that we need in order to provide those images. As we get further downrange and we go over the horizon, we no longer have that direct link. And so we rely on NASA's teeter system to send telemetry.
Mira, ahí va. La primera razón es de que pues al principio ponen las cámaras porque puedes recibir la señal sin problema, pero llega un momento en donde ya está demasiado la distancia,
Okay, so we're looking
demasiado
at real data, what's happening.
amplia.
It's just a graphic
Entonces
or
las
image.
imágenes no sirven.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Entonces la única
Awesome, that's
forma
really
es
cool.
la
So,
telemetría.
you know, today we have, right now we're in the
Es la
first
manera
of
más
3
rápida de
centaur
poder saber
burns. Can you talk a little
y
bit
estar
about why
monitoreando
we
el
need 3
cohete.
burns and how we use those 3 burns to complete our mission today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first burn performs our injection into low Earth orbit. Unfortunately, if we just continue that burn from that point in time, we wouldn't necessarily be aligned with where we need to be in order to get to the moon. So what we do after we get to low Earth orbit is we shut those engines down, we coast around until we get to the right spot to do that, and then we light those engines up again. When we do that and complete that burn, that will allow us to send the Astrobotic Peregrine lander onto the moon. So we shut those engines down again. We are ready to do that.
Ya nada más que nos
And then
confirmen de
start
que
the
ya
moon
está
one
en
more
marcha
time
la
in
luna y
order
ya
to
está
do the
todo
third
bien.
burn.
Ya de
And
ahí
it's going to take
todo lo demás está
Celestis'
sencillo,
Enterprise mission
pero
back
estos
into
son
space.
importantes.
So let's talk a little bit about where these things happen. We're going to go ahead and shut down the main engines on the Centaur when we get about halfway across the Atlantic Ocean. And then we're going to coast the rest of the way across the Atlantic Ocean, across Africa, and go ahead and start the engines up again when we get to Madagascar. And that's where we'll do the second burn. And then we coast again until we get about to Papua New Guinea. And when we get about to over Papua New Guinea, that's where we'll go ahead and do that third and final burn.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of these key milestones that are ahead of us. What can everyone expect to see as far as the timeline of these mission events as they continue watching today?
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the clock right now, looks like we've got about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes left here in the first burn of the upper stage. We're going to coast for about 30 minutes after that as we do that coast across the Atlantic Ocean and across Africa. The second burn will be about 4 minutes long, and then we'll have another coast for 30 minutes before we have a pretty short, like 20-second burn for the final burn. Once we've done that, then we've got some engineering demos we're going to do before we finally safe the stage and shut everything off. And then about 4 days later is when the Centaur will leave the Earth-Moon system and be off on its way to deep space.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thanks for joining us today. And we'll let you get back to watching those next events.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Amanda.
Thanks.
Ahí va.
PU system is steadily making the correction down to a nominal MR. Or 1 minute, D'Amico.
Falta un minuto para el apagado de los
Both engines
motores,
firing normally.
pero están operando normal. En la parte de arriba ahí se ve el dibujito. Ahí está el módulo lunar. ¿Sí lo ven?
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T plus 15 minutes 30 seconds. We are approaching the first main engine cutoff. Let's listen in.
Coming up on MECO 1. cranked onto open loop control and MECO. We have cutoff. Both engines show normal shutdown signatures.
Okay.
We have settling established, 85% duty cycle. We are now in a 27-minute, 51-second coast duration to second burn of Centaur.
Ok, de acuerdo.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T plus 16 minutes 20 seconds. We just heard flight commentator Rob Gannon confirm successful cutoff of the first main engine, and all systems continue to operate nominally. Our next event, main engine start 2, will occur in about 27 minutes. At this time, we'll pass the broadcast back to the
Bueno,
NASA team.
fíjense lo que anunciaron. Dicen que realizaron el
We'll
apagado
join you back in as we
principal.
approach the separation
Hasta los
of our
27
Peregrine
minutos
spacecraft.
posterior a estos
Over to you,
van a
Megan.
volver a encenderlos ya
Thank you
para
again, and
darle
congratulations
potencia.
to you and the ULA team so far. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Space Coast of Florida, where we just witnessed the first launch of NASA's
Bueno, ahí va.
CLPS initiative. It was a magnificent sight, leaves me speechless apparently. Just really lighting up the night sky and loud enough to set off a couple of car alarms nearby. CLPS is short for Commercial Lunar Payload Services. It's a new model in which NASA contracts space on commercial missions to send science experiments to the moon ahead of us landing astronauts there. For today's launch, NASA selected Astrobotic to deliver its 5 lunar instruments. This is the first mission for its Peregrine spacecraft. Today was also the first launch of ULA's new Vulcan rocket. Again, congrats. It lifted off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station's Launch Pad 41. Our broadcast here on NASA TV will continue through Peregrine acquisition of signal, which is expected to happen at the earliest around 3:17 a.m. Eastern Time. With me now is Sandra Connolly. She's the Deputy Associate Administrator of NASA's Science Mission Directorate. Good morning, and thanks for being here, Sandra.
Good morning. It's a thrill to be here.
Yeah, what did you think of the launch?
It was amazing. Yet another beautiful ULA launch. Totally spectacular, and it's super exciting to know that now our Peregrine One lander is on its way to the moon, and in about 2.5 weeks it's going to go into orbit, and a few weeks later from that, in mid to late February, we're going to actually see it land, and that will be the first, well, actually it'll be one of the early landings on the moon since Apollo, over 50 years, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. U.S. landings on the moon.
Yeah, it is. And CLPS is new as well. So talk to us a little bit about this program. We're using commercial companies to send science instruments to the moon for us. Why is that?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this program. It is a game-changing program for us. It really is leveraging industry in new ways. As you've probably seen, I mean, the whole aerospace industry has evolved over this last decade in amazing ways, and I think this is just yet one more step in doing so. So our commercial partners are actually delivering a service. They're delivering our payloads and other organizational payloads, whether it's other companies, whether it's international partners. Basically, anybody who wants to procure the service can deliver a payload to the moon using the CLPS program.
And so there are 20 payloads flying on the Peregrine spacecraft right now. 5 of those are NASA's. Can you tell me a little bit about what they'll be studying once they get to the moon?
Yeah, so again, amazing service. So our payloads are going to be studying things, including understanding, studying water, studying the volatiles or the resources on the moon, studying the atmosphere, and also the radiation environment to help inform us for the future when we have humans back on the moon.
Sandra, thank you so much. I'm excited to see what we do with this initiative and this launch here today.
Thank you so much. And let me just say, go Vulcan and go Peregrine One.
Yes, you can totally say that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so when Peregrine lands on the near side of the moon on February 23rd, it will be one of the first lunar landings for the U.S. since the final Apollo mission over 50 years ago. Let's head back over to Astrobotic's Olivia Chapla.
Thanks, Megan, and what a great day so far. So for those of you just tuning in, I wanted to reintroduce myself. I'm Olivia Chapla, Director of Marketing and Communications for Astrobotic. Astrobotic is a space company with our primary headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we've just watched our Peregrine lunar lander rocket into space aboard a United Launch Alliance Vulcan rocket. This Peregrine spacecraft's mission is to carry 20 payloads or cargo to the lunar surface from 7 different countries. 6 of those nations have never reached the moon before. Our aim is to autonomously land on the lunar surface a few weeks from now. We're taking the long way around, and we expect Peregrine to land on February 23rd, 2024. We've got all eyes on the Peregrine lander as it waits to separate from the Vulcan rocket in about 30 minutes. At that point, we will seek to establish communications with the lander. And now we'll take a more in-depth look at Peregrine's full journey to the moon with an animation. Once ULA's Vulcan rocket launches, we will then know the exact day the
Miren, ahí va.
spacecraft
Esa
will
es la
achieve a soft
trayectoria que
landing
estaba
on the moon.
indicando. Está dando
The
vueltas
first entry
ahorita.
attempt could be anywhere from 10 to 60 days from launch. Because this is Peregrine's first ever trip to the moon, our team is not taking a direct path. Peregrine will first complete one Earth orbit so the team can get critical data on the spacecraft and test maneuvers before executing a very critical milestone, entering lunar orbit. Peregrine will orbit the moon at 3 altitudes. The first orbit will last about 33 hours. Peregrine's second orbit can be up to 35 days. The spacecraft's third and final orbit around the moon will last 48 hours. Next up,
Si se fijan cómo no es
Peregrine will
derecho.
attempt a soft landing on the lunar surface autonomously. The team will issue a landing sequence that will command the spacecraft to
O
enter
sea, no es
the
así como que
orbit.
derecho, ¿no?
About 15 kilometers from the lunar surface, an exciting powered descent.
Entonces, la fecha tentativa para el aterrizaje es el
While we wait for
23
the Peregrine
de
spacecraft
febrero.
to separate
El
from the
23 de
Vulcan rocket
febrero
and
es
begin that
cuando
exciting
pretenden
journey to the
aterrizar.
moon,
Digo,
I
pero
have
tenemos que
Astrobotic's
esperar nada más de
founder
que,
and chief executive
que se
officer,
haga
John Thornton.
inserción en la trayectoria que
Hi
tienen
there, John. I
planeado.
understand you are
Sí, por eso
currently
está
at
la transmisión
ULA, just a
todavía. O
stone's
sea,
throw from where I
gran
am
parte
now,
de la
and we
misión se
both
está
just saw
cumpliendo
ULA's
del
Vulcan
lanzamiento,
rocket
pues,
achieve liftoff with our
gran parte
very
del
own
lanzamiento
Peregrine aboard.
de
Tell me,
los,
after
de
waiting
los pequeños
for this
escollos, ¿no?
moment for years, how are you
Van
feeling?
bien, van bien.
It's
Pero
a dream. This is the
sabemos,
moment we've been
hay que
waiting
esperar.
for 16 years, and I'm standing in mission control, and we just had a beautiful launch. Thank you, ULA. So excited.
Todo
We
está
are on
funcionando,
our
todo
way
va
to
en
the
marcha.
moon.
I can tell you and everyone else are in a really, really excited buzz today for sure. So tell me, what else do you think is the most important thing about our Peregrine mission today?
So this is the beginning of the dawn of a new era for the surface of the moon and how we think about space. This is an opportunity for commercial payloads to fly to the surface of the moon on a regular, routine basis. That means our nation's scientists, our world scientists, can access the moon in ways never before possible. And we are seeing the beginnings of that right now as we speak on our journey to the surface of the moon. Our first mission carries 20 payloads from all over the world. 6 nations on board the mission will touch the surface of the moon for the very first time. It's a phenomenal, exciting mission
Fíjense,
to be a part of, and it's a real honor
sabemos
to be
y
here
hemos
today.
estado mencionando de
Could
que
not
México
imagine a
pues
better
estaría
start to the
llegando a la
mission.
Luna, pero solamente son
That's
6,
true.
bueno,
What do you have to say to
son
the
6
Astrobotic team
aparte
and to
de
all of the payload
México.
customers who make
No,
today's
5,
mission
6 con
possible?
México.
For 16 years, we've been pushing for this moment today. And along the way, we had a
6
lot of
naciones,
hard
correcto.
challenges that we had to overcome. And a lot of people doubted us along the way. But our team and the people that supported us believed in the mission, and they created this beautiful moment that we're seeing today, working incredibly hard to make this possible. I can't thank the thousands of people between our team, our suppliers, our partners that have made this moment possible today. It's an unbelievable feat, and it is the culmination of all of everyone's effort coming together for this moment, believing in this possibility that a small company in Pittsburgh, of all places in this country, can lead America back to the surface of the moon.
Thank you, John. Well, I'll let you get back to the team that are in Florida with us as we wait for the Peregrine spacecraft to separate from Vulcan's rocket in about 30 to 40 minutes. For now,
Can't
back
wait.
to
Thanks,
Megan.
Olivia.
Oh, thank you.
Now, CLPS missions are an important step in returning to and staying on the moon. But these lunar landings that will help shape our future there are not without risks.
Landing on the moon is hard. We're going back. Under this Artemis program, we're going to be sending humans to the moon for the first time since Apollo. So ahead of humans, we want to get up as much science exploration and technology experiments as possible.
So CLPS starts facilitating a lot of the early science, the things we want to learn before we even send humans. CLPS stands for Commercial Lunar Payload Services, CLPS.
The services part is the key element.
Ordinarily, when NASA delivers a payload to the surface of the moon, they do it with a commercial partner, but NASA controls the building of the vehicle. Now, we're buying the service of delivery of our lunar payloads to the surface of the moon.
It is a delivery service, akin to a delivery service that you'd have here on Earth.
NASA will provide payloads to a commercial company. They decide how to get it to the moon. They have to develop their own lander, but they also have to manage the entire end-to-end mission.
It's meant to provide affordable, rapid, frequent access to the lunar surface through American companies.
We're funding different companies.
We have commercial companies that are competing to win task orders to deliver our payloads to the surface of the moon.
One of the goals when we started CLPS was to help establish a lunar economy.
Somebody has to do it first, and then it becomes commercially available. Then they're able to crank them up. Then they're able to make it more affordable. And so the lunar surface is just the next frontier for a commercial environment.
But we had to acknowledge up front, all the way through the highest levels of the agency leadership, that some of them will fail. These missions may not be as successful as a traditional NASA mission.
We have accepted the risk that going through this innovative approach with these commercial companies, that there could be some failures. Some of them are new companies. None of them have ever successfully landed on the surface of the moon. So they're going to learn lessons.
We need to give our vendors the opportunity to learn.
And so that'll help ultimately buy down our risk as these companies learn, okay, what does it take to actually build up the lunar lander, integrate payloads, get to the lunar surface and land safely?
They've been able to demonstrate that they have very, very good technical depth and the ability to design and execute missions. We're willing to take more shots on goal. We aren't risking human lives. And in the big picture, if we're flying missions at 1/10 of the cost of a NASA mission, and we fail 2 of them, we still get 8 missions for that same price.
Even with 1 or 2 or 3 failures, this is still a very economical proposition. It's a risk posture which is more risk tolerant than NASA is accustomed to. There's not a single one of these companies that's willing to bet their mission on a coin toss. Every one of them is doing what they can in order to have the most successful mission possible. But the important thing to realize is that risk tolerant does not mean risky. And the rewards are a long-term ability to get payloads to the moon inexpensively, frequently, and rapidly.
We want science, so we can then put more of our resources on even more science, exploration, and technology payloads and get more of a return on investment when we get to the moon.
CLPS provides tremendous benefit across the scientific and economic communities.
So there's a lot we'd like to learn about the moon to help human habitation and prepare us for missions to Mars and beyond.
So the moon is the first step.
And a lot has to happen before Peregrine lands safely on the moon. Astrobotic's Olivia Chaplow shows how they tested the spacecraft here on Earth and what the team will do during its journey in space.
Peregrine has gone through quite a journey already and still has a long list of objectives to complete on its way to the moon. We've categorized these objectives into 5 stages, beginning with engineering it here on Earth. First, we built and tested a bolt-for-bolt engineering model of Peregrine. Based on our findings, we constructed the final spacecraft to send to the moon. Each iteration of Peregrine went through rigorous testing to ensure it will survive the harsh conditions of launch and space environments. Phase 2 objectives will begin when the spacecraft separates from the rocket. Once separated, Peregrine will power on and establish communications with Earth. At this stage, we'll receive telemetry informing us of the spacecraft's position, orientation, and general operational health. One of the first commands we send to the spacecraft will initiate thrusters to point Peregrine's solar panels at the sun to charge its battery. We are planning for all of these objectives to be completed today. Next, and off camera, our Phase 3 objectives begin. These objectives include trajectory adjustment maneuvers in space before lunar orbit insertion. After lunar insertion, Peregrine will complete 3 orbits around the moon.
Fíjense
Then,
cómo
the last
ahí
phase
viene
will
todo
begin
el programa, ¿no?
training and operations.
Así es como va a aterrizar, mira.
And for a closer look at landing, I'm joined now by Mike Hennessy,
Vamos a escuchar a este
Educational
vato.
Director of the Moonshot Museum in Pittsburgh. Good morning to you.
Good morning. It's spectacular to be here today.
Absolutely. We saw a launch, right?
Yeah, and it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me about Peregrine and the spacecraft we have you on, because you know a lot about Peregrine and this mission. Why is that?
Well, every day I've had a front row seat at Peregrine under construction. I work at the Moonshot Museum, and we share a wall of windows with Astrobotic. And better yet, I've seen kids with their faces pressed against the glass, knowing they're going to grow up to become that next generation of makers that take us to the moon.
That's fantastic. And you also brought us some props here. So these are different parts, different materials that make up the multi-layer insulation. That's what goes around the spacecraft, right?
Right, that's the thermal protective space blanket for the craft, and we have a number of different materials here. This is Astro Quartz. It's a woven ceramic fiber, very heat resistant. We've got aluminum, which is great for reflecting solar heat, and this is also aluminum. Glitters a little more like gold, but it's just aluminum that's been covered with a polymer called Kapton, and you can see it actually on our model here. We have of the Peregrine lander.
Right here. This is the multi-layer insulation.
Yeah, we've got the multi-layer insulation, and that's wrapping these fuel tanks, kind of like cosmic baked potatoes.
And why do we need all these different materials?
Well, the moon is a harsh environment, and it takes a lot of technical know-how to land there. There's no atmospheric blanket like we have on Earth. So we need a thermal space blanket to protect against wild temperature extremes, boiling hot days, freezing cold nights, several hundred degrees below zero, and Peregrine's been engineered to endure that.
Okay, so now we know how it will be protected during landing. How will it land? What technologies are we using to make sure that it lands safely when you say that the moon isn't the easiest place to land on?
Right, and that's my favorite part of the story because this robot is going to land itself. Because we have about a 2.5 second signal delay from the Earth to the moon and back. It's like having a self-driving car going to another world. We have a full suite of sensors, gyroscopes, Doppler, LiDAR, star trackers, and a really cool technology called terrain relative navigation, or TRN. About 9 miles out, Peregrine will activate its camera, and as it's descending, and the camera is taking pictures, the computer will be playing kind of a high-speed game of flashcards. Comparing those pictures to 3D maps, and then Peregrine will have to make decisions in order to come to a landing. We're going to test drive this technology on Peregrine, and then on Astrobotic's next lunar lander, Griffin, TRN will be in the driver's seat when we head to the moon's south pole.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I know Griffin is going to be delivering another NASA payload, so another partnership where we get to do this together.
Yeah, I think another great example of how CLPS is bringing together entrepreneurship and accelerating the pace of science and taking us out into the solar system.
Mike, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so the Astrobotic team hopes to land on the near side of the moon on February 23rd in a place called the Bay of Stickiness, a lunar feature formed by ancient hardened lava flow. It's located outside of the Gruithuisen domes, which is the largest dark spot on the moon. Why does NASA want to conduct science here? Well, on Earth, formations like these domes need significant water and also plate tectonics to form. But without these key elements on the moon, lunar scientists have been left to wonder how the domes formed and evolved over time. We'll, of course, have coverage of the landing on our NASA Plus app or whichever social platform you watch us on. Now, earlier in the show, we told you about the NERVIS payload from NASA's Ames Research Center. The other payload from Ames is the Neutron Spectrometer System, or NSS.
I'm Rick Elphick. I'm the principal investigator of the Neutron Spectrometer System aboard the Peregrine One lander. NSS measures neutrons coming out of the lunar soil, and the neutrons tell you a lot about the makeup of the lunar soil. The neutrons that we measure with the neutron spectrometer are specifically related to the presence of hydrogen, the H in H2O, or water, and that's its real purpose, is to locate water, to actually act as a divining rod. Peregrine will be landing in a location where we really don't expect very much water, if any at all. But it's an interesting experiment. The exhaust system of its descent engines will actually spray paint the surface with its exhaust. And part of that exhaust is water, and some of that water is actually going to stick onto the surface of the moon. Then after we land, NSS can monitor how that water goes away as the sun rises at the landing site and the day gets warmer and warmer. Water is really important as a resource for exploration. Astronauts need it for drinking water, but you can also use it by splitting it up into hydrogen and oxygen as rocket fuel. So if you can find water in place where you're going to, that means you can use it there and not have to bring it up from Earth.
Now, NASA has 2 more payloads flying to the moon today. We're going to tell you about both of them in just a few minutes. But first, let's introduce you all to Chris Culbert, Program Manager for CLPS out of NASA's Johnson Space Center. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Megan. Thank you. It's a wonderful day.
It is. We just watched the launch. What did you think?
It was amazing. Oh my God. What a wonderful feeling. That rocket was gorgeous.
Yeah, and so NASA has 5 payloads hitching a ride. Tell me about the different things that they'll be studying and why they're studying those things.
So this early mission for CLPS, this is our first mission. So our first 2 early missions are mostly carrying small instruments that help us learn more about the environment of the moon. As we get further into CLPS in future missions, we'll raise the complexity and start studying more complex, more difficult questions. But at the beginning, we're mostly trying to characterize what the moon is like, what the radiation does, what kind of environment we can find there. It doesn't have an atmosphere, but there's particles and dust and other things. We're trying to get more information about that so that we can help guide future human missions more effectively.
And how soon could we see data from some of those instruments so that we can start creating that fuller picture?
We'll start getting data back within hours of landing on the moon.
Wow.
Now, the scientists will need some time to analyze that information and turn it into the kind of information that helps guide future missions. But we should be getting data back from the moon within a few hours of landing, and we'll all the way for as long as 14 days on the moon. We'll be gathering that data. But the scientists will then take that information offline and analyze it for a while.
So basically, these missions, these instruments that we're sending, they're scouting the moon for us.
Yes, yeah, they're telling us what the moon is like, helping us understand what we need to know so that we can take humans there safely. It also allows us to better design future instruments and other experiments that will pinpoint the kinds of things we need to know about the moon to be able to work and live there.
Chris, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're now less than a few minutes away until the Peregrine spacecraft separates from Vulcan's Centaur upper stage. We're going to go back to ULA for that milestone. But before that, another quick status update on Peregrine from Olivia.
Thanks, Megan. And now I'm checking in on Astrobotic's mission control team. In about 20 to 30 minutes, they're expecting Peregrine to power on and then try to communicate with them on the ground. Peregrine will establish ground communications with NASA's Deep Space Network, and then we will begin receiving telemetry. As we wait for those milestones, here's an in-depth look at the inner workings of the Peregrine lunar lander.
And now we'll take a look at the Peregrine spacecraft. You'll notice that we've removed the MLI or multi-layer insulation so we can better see the inside of the spacecraft. Throughout Peregrine's journey, they'll keep an eye on the spacecraft's temperatures, pressures, power levels, and communication system. Solar panels at the top of Peregrine charge its batteries to power the spacecraft. Moving down towards the center of the spacecraft are the payload decks. You'll notice the decks have a unique isogrid pattern that we've used as an inspiration for a lot of our graphic design for the mission. This structure pattern optimizes the sturdiness of the payload decks while also minimizing its weight. Affixed to these decks are all 20 payloads. 20 individual pieces of cargo from 7 different countries are aboard these 2 main decks. Peregrine has 12 attitude control system engines called thrusters that are used to orient the spacecraft. You can see 4 large propellant tanks filled with monomethyl hydrazine and multiple mixtures of oxygen-nitrogen, or MON, as oxidizer. Mounted to the bottom of the spacecraft are 5 main engines that will slow the craft down as it approaches the lunar surface. These engines use a hypergolic bipropellant pressure-fed system. Believe it or not, Peregrine will use the majority of its fuel in the last 15 minutes of the mission as we attempt a soft landing on the lunar surface. Peregrine has 4 landing legs attached to its base. These legs have a honeycomb structure on the inside that will crush to absorb the impact of Peregrine landing on the lunar surface. Peregrine is designed for an autonomous landing. That means it will use complex computing and a suite of sensors instead of human pilots. There are 2 antenna relays and a high-power transponder to relay communications between the spacecraft and the Astrobotic team. The relay will connect Peregrine with NASA's Deep Space Network, or DSN, utilizing the same dishes that communicate with the James Webb Space Telescope as well as other historic missions.
And the last major feature of Peregrine is something you can't see. It's the hundreds of people who have worked on, tested, and gotten the spacecraft to the launch pad today. A shout out to the team we like calling the Astrobots, and a shout out to our payload customers who are sending their items to the moon with us. Your continued commitment to science and lunar exploration is important for humanity. The Peregrine lunar lander has 20 pieces of cargo called payloads aboard. You can find the full manifest on the Astrobotic's website, but here is a look at a few of the payloads. IRIS rover. This is a student-built rover with a mission to take photos and send them back to Earth as it drives across the lunar landscape. Once Peregrine lands on the moon, IRIS will deploy to the surface to begin its mission. And here we have another Carnegie Mellon University payload called Moonark. Moonark is seen as a cultural museum to the moon, comprised of 4 independent chambers and weighing a combined total of 10 ounces. It contained hundreds of images, poems, music, nano-objects, and earthly samples. Next, we have Colmena, a fleet of micro-rovers and the first Latin American scientific instrument ever sent to the moon.
Mira, ese es el
Consisting of
Colmena.
5 small rovers, it will demonstrate a coordinated moon exploration. Lastly, we have the DHL Moonbox.
No sé, es lo que ando investigando que tiene que ver en el DHL ahí, porque tiene el logo. Digo, alguna colaboración ha de haber hecho, pero ahorita no encuentro.
Celestial neighbor.
Mira, ahí tiene el DHL, ¿sí
Now, this
fijan?
is just a snippet of the 20 payloads aboard Peregrine. Again, you can find the full list on Astrobotic's website. Now back to Megan.
We are now less than 10 minutes away from Peregrine separation, so let's get back over to the ULA team and Amanda Sterling to take us through that.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks to those of you who are still following mission progress of ULA's Vulcan Cert-1 flight. For those who are just tuning in, I'm Amanda Sterling, and I'm here at ULA's Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. ULA's inaugural Vulcan rocket lifted off on its first flight test at 2:18:38 a.m. Eastern, and all systems continue to operate nominally.
Minute, 1 second burn.
Mira, aquí encontré algo.
And we've begun pressurizing the propellant tanks in preparation for second burn.
Mira, dice, en colaboración con Astrobotic, DHL ofrece una caja lunar para ofrecer el servicio para mandar cosas a la luna.
Coming up on LH2 pre-start.
Ah, mira, empezando con $460.
LH2 pre-start.
Bueno, pero esta es una publicación del 2019.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T+45
No sé si
minutes,
sigue
8
activo
seconds.
el...
Coming up next is the second main engine start of ULA's Centaur upper stage.
Digo, en breve van a encender los motores. Ahí van.
Position, everything looking good.
El main engine startup.
15 seconds to mess.
Ahí va. Ya sé, ¿no? Alguna piececilla.
We have ignition, full thrust. 2 good engines.
Ahí va.
Everything looking good.
Recuerden que esta es una representación gráfica de lo que se está recibiendo del cohete para poder interpretarlo mejor. De otra forma, los chicos nos hubieran mostrado nada más puros datos.
To launch in NASA's new CLPS initiative to have American companies send its science experiments to the moon.
Astrobotic is a full-service lunar company. It starts with our terrestrial testing and development services that can build propulsion systems and test propulsion systems on Earth, to the sensors that make precision landing possible, to our rovers that will deploy down on the surface of the moon, to one day our power systems that will deploy on the moon and provide sustaining power for the infrastructure on the surface. Astrobotic is in all of those businesses, and we are in the business of making space accessible to the world, and the moon is just the beginning. The big thing that we're known for is our 2 lunar missions to go to the surface of the moon. Our first one is about to launch, and our second one flies in 2024. The Peregrine mission is important because it's among the first commercial missions to return to the surface of the moon. This is the first time as a nation going back since Apollo. It's the first time for 6 nations that could land on the surface of the moon with our mission. This is the dawn of a new era of affordable, routine, regular access to the surface. What that means is our nations and world scientists will
Yeah.
access the moon on a routine, regular basis. They don't have to wait for the culmination of their career for one single super mission. They can go back again and again and again. It's the beginnings of learning about the resources on the surface of the moon and potentially one day turning those resources into something that we can use in space and maybe one day return back here to Earth.
Peregrine's development was a years-long process that included many people, like engineers, welders, and technicians, who designed and built the spacecraft. Landing a spacecraft on the moon is very complex. The team worked long hours to get Peregrine to the launch pad.
To be on the pad today with our
Entonces ahí van las
spacecraft
muestras de
strapped to
ADN.
a giant 200-foot tall launch vehicle ready to blast into the heavens it's a little surreal. It's a moment I've been dreaming about for 16 years. And to see it all on one rocket, it's terrifying and exciting and thrilling all at once.
Our Peregrine lunar lander starts its journey to the moon in Florida on a Vulcan launch vehicle. That will blast us into translunar injection, heading us straight out to the moon, where we will enter lunar orbit and start our descent down to the surface. At this point, engines are firing, all eyes are tuned in, and as we soft touch down on the surface of the moon, that marks the beginning of our surface operations and our payloads. As a nation and as a company, as individuals, we all persevere to overcome challenges, and we're going to continue to do that. And this first mission is just our first step, our first attempt to make space accessible to the world, and it certainly will not be our last.
Pressures.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T plus 47 minutes 8 seconds. We're a few seconds from the second main engine cutoff. Here's Rob Gannon.
Ahorita apagan los motores.
30 seconds to nominal MECO.
30 segundos para apagado.
Twenty seconds. We're going to open loop on PU. Coming up on cutoff. We have cutoff. Everything is looking good.
Yo mañana entro a trabajar a las 6, y son las 2.
And we are now in a 2-minute 49-second coast phase of spacecraft separation. We've got full settling going after MECO. And we're reorienting to spacecraft sub attitude.
Dos minutos. 2 minutos para que ya la separación se dé.
And continue to maneuver to our MES 2 attitude. And we're inside a 1.5 minutes to spacecraft separation. Body rates are nulling out.
Ahí va.
And this mission does call for a roll spin for spacecraft separation of 0.5 degree per second. We'll be starting that maneuver shortly.
A 26 segundos ya.
This is Vulcan Mission Control at T plus 50 minutes, 10 seconds. Vulcan has executed all mission events expected, and we are now approaching delivery of the Astrobotic Peregrine Commercial Lunar Lander into a highly elliptical orbit, more than 220,000 miles above Earth to intercept the moon. Let's return to flight commentator
Ahí
Ralph
está.
Newman as we approach separation.
We are spinning down.
Excelente. Muy bien.
And we are now in a 28-minute coast period, the third burn of Centaur.
Bueno, pues era lo que estábamos esperando, ¿no? Ya nada más, ya estando ahí, ya todo lo demás es un poquito menos complicado. No quiere decir que sea fácil. Sin embargo, ya lo más difícil ya pasó. Ya se hizo el lanzamiento, fue la separación, el encendido de los motores, el apagado de los motores, la separación, que era lo crucial para ir rumbo a la luna.
I'm now back with
Y pues
ULA
bueno,
President and CEO
pues ahora
Tori
sí, yo creo que
Bruno.
esto
Tori, our
va en
first
marcha.
Vulcan
Quiere decir
rocket
que son
just
buenas
delivered
noticias
its
para todas
first
las,
payload to
todas
orbit.
las personas
How are you
involucradas
feeling?
que trabajaron en la misión.
I am so thrilled. I can't tell
Y
you
ya,
how much.
ahí va. Pero todo
Absolutely.
excelente.
And again, we're not completely done with the mission here today. Is there
También
anything
cae
else
el
that
lunes
you
y
want
yo
to
no voy a ir
share
a
with the
trabajar
audience?
el 8 de abril.
I am so proud of this team. Oh my gosh, this has been years of hard work. So far, this has been
Exitoso,
an absolutely
excelente.
beautiful mission. Back to the moon and off to our next burn, where we will do our final payload deployment to that heliocentric orbit for the memorial. Our team has done such a good job. Bravo, Zulu to everyone. This is just, it's hard to describe.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that too. So again, thank you so much for joining us on our show. Congratulations, and we'll let you get back to finish the rest of the mission.
Congratulations to you. Give me a hug. All right.
Muy bien, perfecto. Pues bueno, pues muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Ya nada más vamos a estar informando cómo resulta la misión. Pero todo lo demás fue exitoso. Pero bueno, nos vemos, chavos. Nos vemos. Saludos, que estén bien.
Time, we're going to pass the broadcast back to the NASA team to continue mission coverage. We'll be joining back in as we approach